You wave.
All right, so let's get started tonight. My name is Joe. I'm the owner of 718 Cycle. Right here with my wife Deb, who's a producer. Probably gonna wave, but no one can see her. My director or producer helping me out with this technology. Tonight we're gonna try to do 2 cameras, so bear with us. But tonight what we're gonna do is, in doing these things every week, what I think about when I try to come up with topics is what do people come in and ask me all the time? And what is something I can make a video about, so then I can just, when people come in and ask, I can just say, hey, we've got a video about that, go watch it. So we get a lot of questions.
Tell people how to do the questions.
Right, if you have questions, do it through the chat feature.
To everyone.
To everyone, chat to everyone, not just to me. And then my wife, director, producer will pick up on that chat and I can answer questions that way. It's probably the easiest way to do it. So the question that I get often is folks coming in looking to build up a toolkit or asking kind of what tools they should have with them when they're riding around. There's a couple different scenarios about what kind of riding around means to you. And there's a couple kind of questions I usually ask people regarding what kind of work they're willing to do on their own bike on the side of the road. So the first thing we'll talk about is how to carry tools. Like where are you going to carry them? And usually they're going to be in a bit of a pouch, or very traditionally like a little saddle bag under the behind the saddle, so something like this little saddle bag. I've seen people do things like this. Surly makes this really nice pouch, which comes with some other hardware. You throw your tools in there. What I like to use is a tool roll, only because it makes me feel like I'm kind of cool, and it makes me feel like I'm an outdoorsy person. So what we're going to do is I'm going to unroll this tool roll, and we're going to talk about what's in this tool roll. And this is kind of a tool roll that I would carry around. My life right now is I live 800 feet from here, so I'm not riding around all the time, riding around the city. And we used to do a lot of micro tours, and hopefully next year we'll do more of those. So this is kind of a tool roll that talks about, being able to take care of the bike in a remote situation. So, riding around New York City, not incredibly remote. There's always a bike shop somewhere. So this might be slightly overkill, but I'll share what I have in this tool roll, and we can talk about how to use these tools. Nina, I did see your question, and we'll get to it, I promise. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch to camera 2 and really pray that this all works and kind of lay out my tool roll. So this tool roll is made by Swift Industries. It's not incredibly efficient the way I packed it right now. And this would just kind of strap up and under a saddle. And again, I like it because it just makes me feel like an outdoor person a little bit. It's not incredibly efficient, right? If you look at how much material and how heavy this thing is, kind of relative to what you're carrying, yeah, probably not the most efficient way to kind of carry tools. I mean, it's almost like one of those chef knife kind of carriers in a way. But I find it's a nice way to organize things, and it really helps when you're on the road. I've been in situations in the rain, I've been in situations at night with other people, but trying to find the tools that we need to kind of get someone else's bike going. All right, so the first thing, so this tool roll has a bunch of pockets. I've written on them like what these things mean to me, so I can find things easy. Not like I have a long way to look. There's only 8 pockets. But I just write these things down just so I can organize things a little better. And there's also a mistake already on this. But so the first thing we'll talk about is the multi-tool, right? That's like the kind of the primordial bike tool. It's almost like invented for bikes. The multi-tool takes a couple different forms, but has the same function in that it carries multiple tools that you're probably going to need the most often. Now, in the shop, when I build up bikes and when I do a lot of work, this tool is in my hand 95% of the time, all day long. And this is a hex wrench, and this is a 4, 5, and 6 metric hex wrench. The joke is you can take the whole bike shop apart with just this tool. This tool is great because it has leverage. It's great because it's easy to find, but it's hard to travel with, right? Because it's kind of shaped like it is. So you find that you don't travel with these things, and you find that folks will travel with a tool that folds up. So let me show you an example of that. So this is a multi-tool that we sell a lot of. It's from Crank Brothers. And what I always look for when people buy multi-tools is, you know, you kind of look for obviously the tools that are on there. This has the 4, 5, and 6 right away. And those are the most, 4 and 5 are the most common sizes you're going to find on a bike. The 6 you're going to find as kind of a lot of times on the underside of a saddle, like a saddle clamp. The 4 and 5 really, really, if you were only going to carry 2 tools, that would be it. But this particular tool is really nice. By far our biggest seller. Has a bunch of 4, 5, 6, looks like that's an 8. On this side you have a couple screwdrivers, and you have a Torx. And the Torx is that, hard to see that kind of funny star-shaped guy. You start to see what's called T25, which is a Torx 25. You see that around a lot on disc brakes, on some stems, for instance. So that's a common tool that you'll see in multi-tools. It's called T25, and it's like a star-shaped tool. All right, so this is one version of a multi-tool. This is like 20 bucks. I always like this one a lot because it looks good, feels good. It has every tool you need, plus probably some you don't. And I think it's priced really well. Now this guy has a younger sibling and an older sibling, or a bigger sibling and a smaller sibling, real quick, and I'll show you. The smaller sibling is this guy here, what's called the M5. And this has the 4, 5, and 6, and has a screwdriver. And the more popular, well, not the more popular, the bigger one is this guy. It's like the M19. It has like a chain brake tool. It has spoke wrenches. Really a pretty nice tool. Do I carry it? No, because I think there's too much stuff on it. Like, I think there's too much stuff that I wouldn't need. And with chain brake tools, and we'll get to that in a second, I kind of like carrying a separate chain brake tool as opposed to the chain brake tool that comes on a multi-tool. That's just personal preference. So that's a multi-tool. Now, another version of a multi-tool is, let me grab it real quick. Where did I put it? This is the Rolls-Royce of Multi-Tools. This is from Spur Cycle. This is titanium. This weighs next to nothing. So we have a titanium kind of handle, and then you'll have your stainless steel bits. This is really nice because it's really light. It has a downside, and the downside is that it doesn't ratchet, and we're going to get to that particular tool in a second. But this one doesn't ratchet, so you have to kind of you're turning your tools kind of manually. But unbelievably light. I think it's like 85 grams. I'm making that number up, but it's really, really light. So if that's part of what you're doing when you're riding, trying to stay as light as possible, this is a great one. The one that I use, however, listed in the spoke pocket here, is from Topeak. It's called the Ratchet, like the Ratchet Rocket or something like that. Yeah, the Ratchet Rocket. So that's this tool here. There's a lot of versions of this. We probably sell 5 or 6 variations of this particular tool, but they're all variations on a theme. And the theme is that you have a ratcheting kind of head, and you have a series of stainless steel bits. And this is like this isn't like some kind of, you know, my finger's all messed up, so I'm trying to get this thing in. I can't get it. My producer, where's my producer? There it is. I potentially have a broken thumb, so I'm trying to work with that. So the nice thing about a ratcheting system is you can get into tight spaces and really get some good torque on these things, right? And that's what's called the Ratchet Rocket. And this thing has really all the bits you're going to need, right? It has, it lists them across the top there. You probably can't see it. There's 2, 2.5, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. Phillips head. It has a T25, which is the Torx, and then it has a T10, which is rather uncommon size. It also has a little bit of a socket extender, so you can get into tough places. But this, like I said, this is not like a kind of a chintzy tool. This is actually, I know people that actually use these in the shop. Not this shop, but I know people that have used this as a professional tool. This is a great tool. It starts at like, oh God, I'm using like half a hand here. Starts at like 30, 35 bucks, and there's like a, you know, the Gucci version that's like titanium and all kinds of stuff like that. But this is a great one. So I'm going to put this off to the side after I kind of go through things here. All right, so the next thing I think about when I think about tools, right, that's the multi-tool situation. And that's going to cover a lot of the mechanical fasteners on the bike. It's really, really uncommon that you're going to have imperial or foot-inch tools that you're going to need for your bike. Most stuff is metric. Every single tool I own just about is metric. The only weird place where you might see some foot and inch is maybe some of the old clamps on old saddles, maybe quill stems, but the really old ones. So, you know your bike and obviously know what tools you're going to need for your bike. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is like the whole world around flat tires and the whole world around, that whole situation. The tools involved in changing your flat. And when people come in and ask and they'll say, hey, I want to buy a mini pump, like a small little pump. I'll really talk to them and try to make sure that they are, I tell them that that's for sitting on the side of the road, changing your tire. Are you going to do that? Like, if that's something you want to do, fantastic. But realize that this isn't for home use. They're real pain in the ass to use at home because they're so small. And if you're going to change a flat tire, you're going to need a couple things. If you're going to go down that route, you're going to need an air source. So that's a pump or CO2. We'll talk about that in a second. You're going to need a tube, an extra tube, or a way to patch your existing tube. You're going to need a way to get your wheel off. And there's a couple ways to take your wheel off. And you're going to need a way to get the tire off. So let's start with the tire first. How do we get the tire off the bike? This isn't a demonstration about how to do that. This is more about some of the tools you would need to do that. So to take a tire off of a rim, you're going to need a tire lever. That's these guys here. These are from Pedro's. By far my most favorite in terms of shape and size. A lot of companies make these. There's metal ones. There's titanium ones. These guys are fantastic, and I'll end up breaking maybe 3 or 4 of these a year, but they're super solid. They come as a pair. Most tire levers usually come as a pair or in groups of 3. That's assuming that you're going to need 2 or 3 to kind of get your tire off. Most bike shop people will only need 1 of these, and I usually only travel with 1. But I put them together because they're usually sold as a pair. So this is taking the tire off the rim. Now, taking the wheel off the bike, right? It's always going to be a rear, by the way. Your flat is never going to be a front flat. It's always going to be in the rear. There's really 3 ways to get your wheel off. There's a quick release, which is a lever that most of you guys are probably used to. There is a nut system, which is like a old-fashioned system, but you also see it on track bikes. And there's also what's called a through axle. So a through axle, very easy. You're going to need an Allen wrench, and you'll probably have that with you, no problem. Quick release, you just need your hands because it's a quick release. A nutted connection, and that's if you have a track bike or an older bike where it's a solid axle and a nut on the back. And again, you're going to need to know your bike and need to know how to actually take the wheel off. But you're going to need to travel with something like this. And this is a 15mm box wrench. And this one happens to ratchet. This one's pretty cool. But the challenge of taking the rear wheel off, taking the front wheel off that has a bolt, is that you want to get a lot of leverage, right? Because that bolt's usually pretty tight. Now, a lot of leverage usually means a pretty long wrench, right? The wrenches that we use here in the shop is going to be something like, about that long, at least, if not longer. But traveling with something this long is really a pain, right? So you're going to talk about shorter wrench to get your rear front wheel off. Also, Surly sells a pretty cool product, excuse me, which is this guy here. Of course, it has a can opener on the front because, you can't go anywhere without a bottle opener. But then you'll see the box wrench on the back. And you're able to get this on the nut and actually stand on this and kind of put some real torque on this thing. So this is a nice thing to travel with, again, if this is a part of what your bike has. Now, when we do micro tours, I tend to overpack because, I'm servicing or helping to take care of potentially other bikes that aren't mine. So I usually do take something like this just in order to help someone out. All right, so that's taking the tire off the wheel and taking the wheel off the bike, right? So now we're going to talk about either patching or replacing a tube, right? It's always a good idea to have a tube with you because you might have a flat that's not patchable, right? You might have a flat where you can't actually use the patches. So it's really, really good idea to have a tube, and I'll kind of and then some patches. So I didn't have the tube here. The tube I usually don't carry in this because it's too big. But in terms of patches, what I like to do is I like to have 2 different kinds of patches. There's the glued patches, which are usually in that Rima kit. I'm going to pull these out here. I usually have them separate. So that's what these guys are. These are the glued glued patches, and you're going to deal with the vulcanizing cement.
You want this?
What?
You want this?
No, it's okay. This is a very common way to patch. This is probably the most traditional way to patch. In addition, there are some patches that are called self-adhesive, right? Which are essentially something like this. Park Tool makes one too. And these are basically stickers. I had a hard time opening this one before.
Yeah.
But I have a weird
Here.
top open. Oh, there it
Here.
is.
Did you get it?
Yeah. So these are basically stickers that you're going to stick onto the offending hole and area. And again, this little exercise isn't really about how to do that, and we'll get into that in a future episode for sure. And you know, some of my people that I used to work with really believed in these, so I started to really believe in these. But again, it's just another tool in your toolbox, literally. In addition to that, tire boot. Now, tire boot, which are these guys here, are essentially bigger kind of interior kind of patches that you could put, let's say the tire kind of slits or has a big, kind of a big cut in the tire or a big gash. You can actually use this on the inside of the tire as a temporary fix, the same way you would use like a flat, you know, a spare tire. You wouldn't want to ride on it forever. The tire boots are good to have because, you know, out in the woods and on a ride that's maybe a little more remote, you might tend to get, you know, stuck in a tree branch or something, ripping your tire. So you'd want to use something like this. This is a tire boot. So that kind of goes in the whole patch section, right? I have a whole little section of all my little patches. Now, what always happens is the glue dries out over time because no one uses it fast enough. So we actually have gotten into, I saw the glue separately, which is like, you know, 83 cents or whatever it is. But we always get people that come in that have patch kits where the glue dries out, so they just want to buy the glue. So we have that for sale. So the next thing is we're going to talk about, all right, how to get air into, if you're going to do this, if you're going to sit on the side of the road and change your flat, you're going to have to put air in the tires. Excuse me, there's two ways to do that, or two kind of mechanisms. And I usually travel with both, but I exclusively just use one. The first is a pump. I usually don't carry it in this case here because it's just too big. You know, this one straps to the side of the bike underneath the bottle case. This is from Design. And why I like this pump a lot. It's a little guy. Normally when you have a little pump like this, when you're right on the valve, my finger's the valve, you're kind of like jamming right on the valve and you're kind of jerking the valve around as you're kind of pumping. And that can lead to stress at the base of the valve on the tube, and that always causes, you know, that can cause more flat tires. What I like about this one is it has a removable hose. So let's see what I should do.
You don't need to do
So it has a removable hose. The hose comes out. And it gets on the other side and it's Presta or Schrader, right? So you're just flipping it over. I know some of these other smaller pumps, you have to take out little pieces and flip them over to do the different valves. This one you just flip over back and forth. So by doing this and now kind of pumping, you have a little bit of relief. You're not jamming, you're not jerking on that valve right away. So this is, I think, a nicer system. It's about 30 bucks. I sell out of these constantly. I have more coming in. Yeah, this isn't a huge sales pitch, but just this is, you know, in the shop here, we have a very small shop at 300 square feet. So I kind of drift into selling the stuff that I'm familiar with and I know that works. So we don't sell like 19 different hand pumps. I sell this hand pump. I think this is a really good situation, nice and light. So the other way to put air in the tire is CO2 cartridge. So I have a little section down here, which is the CO2. And I bring this primarily because other people might need it. I don't have a lot of experience using these. I always feel really nervous about using these. You get like one shot. It's really for, you know, it's like, in like, what's the rush? You know, it's like, this is going to be really fast. It's going to jam air in your tire. Like if you're racing or something, yeah, I get it. Environmentally, it's kind of a little bit of a pain in the ass because now you got to get rid of this thing. It's a pressurized air compressor. You never know when you're done with it. You never know if you still have stuff left in it. They're kind of heavy. The pump always works. The pump always pushes the air into your tire. So in the end, I'm a little more of a traditionalist when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I always bring this along because I know that there are people on trips that I go on that may need to use these or may prefer to use these. And I always bring the nozzle head too because a lot of times people will bring CO2 cartridges, they'll forget to bring the nozzle. So I always just throw one of those in. Doesn't weigh much. A long time ago, someone told me about kind of packing for trips, but packing tools and stuff. And he said it's better to be looking at it than looking for it, right? Meaning that I'd rather have this in my bag and be looking at it than not have it in my bag and be looking for it. Now, take it to the extreme, you're going to pack tons of crap. You don't want to do that. But you kind of start seeing the patterns of what it is that you use and what it is that people on trips that you want to be going on would use. All right, so that's dealing with the tire situation. And we are going to do a flat tire class. We used to do a lot of them in our older shop and have a flat basic maintenance and flat fix classes. I think it's really empowering to be able to learn how to do that. We're certainly going to attempt to do that on one of these sessions here because it's a great skill to have. It can save you a lot of money and it can give you a lot of freedom to not have to worry about what might happen if you get a flat, because you're going to get a flat. Everyone gets flats. So that might be in a few weeks, and we'll talk about how that actually works. So that's the whole tire situation. So we started with multi-tool, then we worked into the tire, and now we're going to get into some of the more kind of the more serious kind of situations, and those are going to be chain, drivetrain, and also spokes. So spokes we'll talk about first. Where did I put my spoke stuff? There it is. So for spokes, just riding along and breaking a spoke is really not the greatest, right? Because it has to get replaced. There's no way it's going to fix itself. It's like a leak. It only gets worse. It doesn't get any better, right? So you have to get it fixed. And what happens is when you do break a spoke, let's say you have 32 spokes on a particular wheel. If you do break a spoke, the other 31 spokes now try to go into equilibrium to kind of make the wheel straight, and the tensions start getting all messed up, and it actually starts to cascade negatively through all the other spokes that are trying to overcompensate for that one spoke that's broken. So eventually it just gets worse and worse and worse. So in changing a spoke on the side of the road, definitely requires patience. I've used this a few times with folks. This is called a fiber spoke, and this is actually in tension, can thread through and actually behave like a spoke. It's pretty cool, and the directions are really cool. And when you open it up, the directions are written in a really funny way. It's assuming that you bought one of these, threw it in your bag, never learned how to use it, and then all of a sudden that day comes when you have a broken spoke. So you kind of rip open your tool with bag, you open this thing up. That's going to be the magic potion that's going to save you. And the instructions say, relax. Congratulations. Step one is you have this tool. You have this with you. And then it goes through the situations on how to actually use it. It's actually pretty cool. It's basically just a cable, a nylon cable that runs through the spoke area with tension. Really easy instructions. It's great. I mean, for this little guy, this can really save your trip. They're a little expensive. It's 15, 18 bucks, I think. But this little vial can really save your trip. So again, I'm not telling you how to use it because that's not what we're doing tonight. But having something like this can really save your stuff. In addition, on people that go on longer trips, you'll start to have, and there are some bikes that even let you do this, you'll start to bring extra spokes with you. And I know a lot of people that bring extra spokes. And that involves knowing the length of your spokes, because there's going to be different lengths on the rear and the front and on the left side and the right side. Long story. But there are some bikes, like Surly makes a bike called Long Haul Trucker, and on the side of it, back by the rear wheel, there's a slot where you can actually put your spokes. It almost looks like a guitar, the way the spokes are laid into the frame, that allows you to take spokes with you. Certainly that's a little advanced to kind of be able to change a spoke. And sometimes it might even require taking the cassette off. But, if you're in the middle of nowhere and that's all you got, a lot of people learn how to do that before they go on really, really long trips. So that's, that's kind of dealing with wheel situations, because again, unchecked or unfixed, it's only going to get worse and can get dangerous if you're breaking spokes more and more. That's kind of the spoke kind of situation. In addition to that, what I always like to bring, and these guys are a little heavy. This is a spoke wrench, and this is like what's called a triple spoke wrench. Spokes, as they enter the rim, there's a little bit of a nipple, and that tightening and loosening is how you tighten and loosen and true a wheel. There's just different kinds of different sizes of nipples. So what this kind of tool does is it allows you to kind of, prepare for the eventuality of different sized nipples as you are tightening and loosening spokes as you're, maybe you're trying to true a wheel. So I always bring one of these guys. So this is like my wheel section. Not a lot of stuff, but that's it. That's what I've got. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is chains. Now, I've been around like people that have broken chains, and breaking chains doesn't happen in normal circumstances with a bike that's been normally maintained. A broken chain maybe happens with a, well, it's not like I'm victim blaming right now, so maybe I won't even say that. Broken chains can happen. They don't happen very regularly. The chains are unbelievably engineered. They go through a lot of stress. When chains are kind of moving in the direction they're supposed to move in, they're fantastic. When chains get messed up is when they kind of are forced laterally, and when things bend, or maybe there's a stick that gets caught in the rear derailleur, or maybe you shift too far and your derailleur isn't set up well, or maybe you run over something that's caught in the chain, like a plastic bag. Those are the worst. Right, so now you get your chain all messed up, right? And there's nothing worse than dealing with a messed up chain on your bike, because you're getting all dirty, it's frustrating, it's all twisted up, it doesn't look like it's gonna like fix or get worked or anything like that. So what I usually do is I usually will bring a chain tool, but also I'll bring what's called a master link, and I can show you what those are. So this is the chain tool, and this is the master link. Now, I know a lot of multi-tools come with chain tools on them, and they're all right. I like this one. It's very light, and it's just kind of a purpose-built little tool. It's I just like this tool. It's not incredibly expensive. It's not incredibly heavy, but I like using this as opposed to something like, the chain tool that's on this guy here, which certainly would work, but a little more of an appendage where this is like an actual tool. So what you're going to need to do is when you, and a master link is this guy here. I'll see if I can see that on the card there. I know it's not zoomed in well and not focused really well either, but we'll try. So what you need to know when you go to master link is you basically just need to know what size chain you have. And chains are sized by how many gears you have in your rear cassette. Right, so people say, oh, I have a 10-speed bike, and 10-speed is kind of a name that people use for bikes that look a certain way. It doesn't actually count to 10 speeds for many instances. So what you want to do is you want to count how many gears you have in the back, and that's the cassette on the rear wheel. It's all those gears in the back. You want to count how many you have. You have somewhere between 5 and 13. Somewhere in there is how many gears you have in the back. And what happens is, because the spacing on the rear wheel is constant, when you have more gears in the back, that means that the gears are closer together. So that means the chain is thinner. So as you get more gears in the back, the chain gets thinner. So if you tried to use a thick 5-speed chain on like an 11-speed cassette, it wouldn't even fit. Right? So you just have to be aware of what size cassette you have, so what size chain you have, and then just get a master link that corresponds with that. So this is I have a 9-speed chain that we're going to take a look at, and this is a 9-speed master link. Normally on trips, I'll take master links from the whole spectrum, from 5-speed up to 12-speed. I have them, just throw them in a little bag. I just throw them in my thing just because it helps people along, because most people don't have that. So to use a master link, what I've got set up right here, this is a situation where we have a broken chain. And all the master link is doing is you're going to remove the damaged part of the chain. And again, this is me talking about not showing how to use these tools. And I'm going to show you how to use this tool because someone asked. One of the questions that someone emailed in was, how do you use a chain breaking tool? So what's going to happen is you're going to have a messy mess of chain. Like maybe it's twisted or bent. So you want to kind of remove out all of the damaged chain, and you can only do this up to a point, right? You couldn't remove like half the chain is bent. You can't remove that and have a functioning bike. You can remove, 1 or 2 or 3 links, and maybe you won't get all your gears, but you'll be pedaling and you'll be able to get to the next stop. So with the master link, what you need to end up with is you need to end up with two ends of the chain that are female. By female, I mean like that. Oops. That's what you want to end up with, two females. So let's say I didn't have that. What I would do, I'm going to make sure, so if I look at a chain, and looking at a chain, there's like a male piece and a female piece. And what I'm looking to do is I'm looking to remove links so I get a female piece. And I'm going to put this chain tool in, I'm going to twist it, and again, there it goes, it cracked all the way through. And all I'm doing is I'm pushing the pin, I can see there, I'm pushing this pin through the chain to remove it. And again, this would be the damaged part of the chain that I'm removing because I want to get it to a point where I can use my master link. So now I've removed that. And now I have two females once again. And let me get my master link. And the master link, so that was the hard part. I mean, actually, the hard part's going to be getting this thing out of its package, actually. Nice. Put away from me. Close the knife. So this is a master link, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to put solid side in one, and this would be on the bike while I was doing this. I'm going to put the solid side on the other. And there's a little slot, if you can see, hard to see, basically putting the male side through the slots in the other pin plate. Without my fingers, so I'm going to show how to do this. There it is. And you know, you're putting it through and then you're pulling it, but on the bike is when you're pulling it. And when you do it on the bike and you actually have tension on the chain, this basically this little piece, like this whole thing snaps into place. And that's really how you're going to use, and you got to make sure you do that. That's the one part you got to do when you put a master link in, is you got to kind of, basically what I do when I build a bike is I kind of, you know, really grab on the pedal and kind of hold the chain and kind of really try to jerk it forward. And that will jerk the chain in place in that master link because there is a slot there that the pin has to go through. So that's really it. You know, dealing with a master link is pretty easy. You could try to put the chain back together. That's a lot more of surgery on the side of the road. But you could actually do that if you really wanted to, and that would involve kind of pushing one of these pins almost all the way through, slotting the new guy in, and then pushing it. And it's a little bit of a challenge, and you really only get one shot at it. So again, side of the road in the rain could be a problem. I'm trying to think what else I had for you. That is kind of what I have in my toolkit. That's kind of some of the theories behind what I'm trying to looking to fix. You know, we do have a lot of folks that'll buy toolkits that, you know, will never learn how to use them. And it's almost worse than not having it at all because, you know, on the side of the road, you're going to be reading instructions for the first time on how to do this. And that's really not a great place to be. So what I would suggest when people do come in is to talk about, you know, use these tools, like practice on them. If I have a version of that tool, I'll show them how it works. But you really need to kind of do that so you're familiar. So now I'm going to switch over to camera A.
And ask about questions. Somebody wanted to know how your thumb is.
Whoa.
That's my computer.
All right.
How's your thumb?
How's my thumb? So the story in the thumb is I cracked it with a hammer about 6 weeks ago. And now it's turned into 7 or even 8 weeks ago. It's a long time ago, right here. Boom. It didn't hurt that much when I did it. And I was like, wow, I thought it would have hurt a lot more than it really did. Oh, that's funny. And then the next day, I was like, oh, it's going to be swollen the next day. And the next day, it didn't really hurt. It was kind of the height of the shop being really, really crazy, super busy. Maybe I was had adrenaline. Maybe I just didn't feel it, or I didn't have time for the pain. But eventually, the pain caught up with me after about 5 or 6 weeks of it not being immobilized and, you know, working the way I'm working, because all day long you're doing this with your hands. So eventually, my wife convinced me to go get some x-rays. I went to get x-rays, but I went on the wrong day, so I have to go back to get x-rays. But I've immobilized it, and it actually has given me a little bit of relief from the pain because it's immobilized a little bit, and I'm able to kind of do what I need to do in the shop without the thumb, which is a little bit of a challenge. Okay. Any other questions? Next.
That was all the questions.
That was all the questions.
Oh, tell them how to do questions.
Yeah, questions, you're going to use the chat feature if you have any questions, the chat to all. And that will send a question to my producer here, and she'll relay the question to me if you have any questions.
Oh, wait.
Oh.
Any headset tools? Do you put headset tools in the?
No. So headsets are, there's two kinds of headsets. There's a threaded headset and a threadless headset. For a threaded headset, meaning that you're going to need like headset wrenches, I can't imagine the thing that you would have to do remotely on your headset that you wouldn't have done already. Or I can't imagine like kind of traveling around with these guys. These are headset wrenches up here. That's a little bit of a chore to kind of travel with. If you're dealing with a threadless headset, which is a more common modern standard, those are really, kind of governed by a top cap, and then the stem has two side bolts, but those are all Allen wrenches. So essentially, your multi-tool is your kind of headset tool. But again, there's not a lot. If your headset's messed up on a long ride, there's probably other things that are really messed up too. I just don't see that as like a thing I plan for, like headset. It's kind of like it's a big, that and bottom brackets, right? Because bottom brackets too. If your bottom bracket's messed up, then you probably have a lot of other things that are messed up at that point, and you're not really taking the crank off on the side of the road, unless you're willing to carry all these tools. And that's, you have to determine if that's what you're going to be doing.
Okay, and so the next question is, so when you're taking off the back wheel to change your tube or tire, I always worry about the derailleur. Is it simple?
So when we do a flat fix class, right, first of all, the front wheel is easy, right? Front wheel is easy, and it's never the front wheel. It's always the rear wheel, right? And I do remember that when I was first starting out, I had a lot of apprehensions about the rear derailleur and how it all worked, and it looked kind of scary, cables and chains and stuff, and how to get the wheel out. So what you really want to do on the side of the road, I mean, in a perfect world, you have a bike stand with you and you put it up in a bike stand to change the rear wheel. Never going to happen in the outside world. So what I would suggest to people to do is to turn the bike upside down, right? Just because trying to do it on its side is a real pain in the ass. And if you're traveling or on a trip and you have like bags and panniers and stuff, it's really going to be a pain to get underneath the wheel. So it's kind of take the bags and stuff off and turn the bike upside down and get decent at working on the bike upside down. Now, when you turn the bike upside down, you have to be careful of a few things. One, wherever you turn the bike upside down on, it's going to scratch your saddle, your bar tape, your computer if you have a Garmin. So, if you're doing it on grass, that's fine, but be careful when you're turning your bike upside down. I have never been really, really good at upside down mechanic work just because I see bikes in a certain way all the time. I know people that are great at doing it upside down, and everything is just kind of backwards. But really getting your bike upside down, pushing the derailleur out of the way. The derailleur is great when you push it in the line of the chain. It has a spring. Pushing that out of the way and dropping the wheel is a pretty easy maneuver once you get used to it, once you're comfortable with it. And again, that's probably going to happen in a few weeks. I'm going to try to figure out how to actually capture that with the high-tech studio equipment that we have here to try to capture how we would do a flat fix class, because it would require a couple different angles. But yeah, I always tell people that getting comfortable taking your rear wheel on and off, while you're watching Netflix, just take your rear wheel on and off. Like, just do it so the first time you're doing it isn't on the side of the road in the rain at night. But yeah, that's a challenge, but it's what I always tell people too about stuff on bikes. Like, it's made to be serviceable. It's not made to be hard. It's not made to be a challenge to remove pieces. Like, the manufacturers want you to be able to remove these things and service them. So I try to keep that in mind when I come across challenges here.
Okay, next question.
Next question.
Tips for guesstimating torque on the side of the road without a torque wrench.
Yeah, I don't have any real tips. They do make small torque wrenches. Like, now we're talking torque and not torques. T-O-R-X, torques, is that weird star symbol that you see on some nuts, and that's the tool that I showed you earlier on. Torque wrench is describing a situation where you're tightening something to a known tightness, and then having the wrench kind of stop or let you know when so you're not over tightening things. When you're dealing with steel and aluminum, you can't, you can over tighten things, but like, you kind of have to understand that, like, when you tighten something down really good, it's going to be tight. Where torque, I think, comes into play a lot more is when you're dealing with carbon components. So if you are concerned about torque, and I do have some people that, I use a torque wrench here when I build bikes, even on aluminum and steel stuff, only because I have the wrench. I have an adjustable torque wrench. I'm working on a bike for someone that's got to be safe, blah, blah, blah. I always use it. I don't bring it with me just because I feel that on the side of the road, I'm feeling that if I tighten something down, it's going to be decent enough to get us to where we're going. But it's hard. It's really hard to know the difference between 5 Newton meters and 6 Newton meters when you're turning a wrench, in the dark. Like, I really don't know, but they do make very small torque wrenches that you can get. We used to sell a couple. We don't sell any right now. But what happens is it's a torque wrench that's set to like 5 Newton meters. And when you're turning it and you get to that end point where it's just tight, the wrench kind of gives way and kind of clicks. So that's kind of a tool you can bring. And they're pretty small. I've seen pretty small ones.
That was it. That's it for the questions. All
right. So that was it. Here's the commercial. We're a small bike shop. Cue the music, right? I don't think there's a smaller bike shop in the world. It's a one-person bike shop. It's 300 square feet. We really survive by creating community. We would, if you're looking, shopping small, shopping local, small businesses, all those great things, check out our web store. It's 718c.shop. We have a sale going on for some stuff that we're trying to get rid of because we have a small space. But those are the kinds of things that really support us and really keep us going. And I sound like PBS, like, if you buy this tote bag, we can bring you more programming. It's not like that at all. It really isn't. But, I would have, we would appreciate it if you took a look at our website at some point. If in some way,
one more,
your life involves buying a gift for someone.
Wait, somebody else has a question. He said one more. What is your morning routine to check your bike every morning during a long trip? As someone who has a brake screw fail off in the middle of nowhere unexpectedly. As someone who had a brake screw fall off in the middle of nowhere.
On longer tours, and we've done, we do week-longs in the Adirondacks, Catskills for 4 or 5 days. That's certainly not going across the country. But what we try to do every morning with everyone is everyone kind of do a bike check. And that's kind of, and I'll do the same thing. You're kind of grabbing your brakes. You kind of, grabbing your brakes to make sure they work. You're inspecting your cables visually, make sure things aren't frayed. Certainly not tightening every bolt every morning or not checking every bolt every morning. That just wouldn't be the time to do that. But the visual inspection of the brakes and the cables is what I do every morning to check and make sure. A bolt falling out, I've had people like rack bolts fall out on the middle of the trip and the rack falls off and everything is, a yard sale everywhere. It's something that you check before you leave on your trip, and that should be enough because it shouldn't come out one day later unless there's something else wrong. But we try to do, in addition to doing, on our long trips, we do a nutrition plan in the morning. We talk about hydration, we talk about distance, we talk about what happens when people get lost. This is every morning we kind of just get together at a picnic table and just kind of go over what the plan is for the day because we want everyone to be safe. But that's kind of it. I just inspect my my cables and I grab my brakes to make sure something hasn't, in the middle of the night, something didn't knock something over.
That was it.
That's it. Website, check the website, buy stuff. Anyway, thank you so much. I really appreciate the questions. Happy Thanksgiving, as my wife is telling me to tell everyone. And we'll see you next Wednesday night, potentially. Not potentially, but I'm going to keep doing this. I think this is just one person because this is a lot of fun. And thank you so much. All right. Have a nice night. Thank you. Good night.
And producer. Thanks. Happy Thanksgiving.
Best producer in the business. The best producer in the whole facility. Excellent. Thank you so much, guys. Have a good night.
Have a good one.